Even only 5 episodes in, it's clear HBO's Westworld is shaping up to be one of their all-time best shows. HBO surpassed every reasonable expectation in their reinvention of Michael Crichton's 1973 original story. They've fully modernized it and in the process given it immeasurable depth, nuance, and relevance to life today. Frankly, Westworld covers a staggering amount of ground. Though many bloggers and critics continue to compare it to HBO's massive hit Game of Thrones, for me it seems clear that HBO has gone out of its way to distinguish Westworld from its epic fantasy series, even if it throws the also great adaptation of George R.R. Martin's novels a nod or two.
This is a simulation, that this is not reality. They're simply there for the amusement of the 21st century guests who are coming to indulge in a fantasy.
Westworld, the series, far more than the original film, concerns itself with the age-old debate surrounding the philosophy of mind. It's the problem of dualism, as it's known in that field, the question of the soul. Since it's likely that the mind is just the brain, does that not make human beings merely sophisticated machines? Is there something more going on with consciousness than brain stuff? Or is it a hybrid of these ideas to form a kind of neo-humanism predicated on neuroscience that makes for the best outcome?
You want to watch a movie for 15 minutes first, or you just want, straight to showing your perfect?
Westworld hasn't told us for sure where it stands along this debate, at least not directly. That being said, a lot of what I have to say about Westworld's philosophic elements and other story stuff is subject to change. Particularly in the most recent episode, there have been signs that a big subversion is in store, a big twist on what the show presents itself as. So keep that in mind. A lot of this stuff could be obsolete in another week or two. That being said, let's jump in. Westworld imagines a possible future where entertainment as a human activity reaches its zenith. It's like everything great about video games, TV, film, drugs, amusement parks, they've all converged into a kind of live-action role-playing experience, except that's the cool thing. The line between role-play and reality in Westworld is kind of hard to make out. Because inside the park, you can actually have sex with beautiful men or women. Take your pick. You can actually experience the rush of murdering someone or of saving them. You can play the hero, the villain, something in between. It redefines the concept of sandbox gameplay, if it's even still a game at that point at all. But this setup is really about the dark side of this technological wonderland, the point at which the android-like machines who do the screwing and the dying and the NPCing become simulations of such incredible realism that they in fact become authentically self-aware.
Let's not go someday, Daddy. Let's go now.
So Westworld may be heaven for the guests, but it's hell for the hosts who now feel and think like real human beings who have become sort of prisoners in this pseudo-reality. And of course, the more that consciousness spreads through the park like a virus, it seems the more likely that this half-heaven will soon become just as hellish for the humans as it's been for the machines.
I asked you point blank if the problem with the update was resolved.
It is.
Then why are you people still pulling hosts for follow-up? Get your house in order, Bernard.
As the apparently imminent revolutionary slogan shared by the machines says, these violent delights will bring violent ends. The androids are the main characters of the show, the hosts, at least for the first entire hour. If anything, the humans running the park feel distinctly like the series' villains.
Good afternoon, sir. Why is this host covered?
I just...
Perhaps you didn't want him to feel cold or ashamed. You wanted to cover his modesty. Was that it? Doesn't get cold. Doesn't feel ashamed. Doesn't feel a solitary thing that we haven't told it to. You understand?
They plot, they brood, and stew inside something like Dr. Evil's volcano bunker. They act more machine-like than their creations, cold and unfeeling as they program, reset, and reconfigure their virtual slaves. For me, this gives the show a distinctly critical stance towards modern capitalism. It's been said that capital today sustains itself through systems of commerce based on a model of rent, on extended access and control to technology and services, by monthly or yearly fees. To enjoy, we all have to plug into the same basic network, and through that network we are surveilled and controlled by technocrats more than was ever possible in human history before now.
Oh, you saw what you just did? Don't kiss me. Porn looked good. Definitely needed some color correcting. Needed some color correcting and some, you know, they didn't really use the technology as much as they could have, but it worked. Did not get a chub.
When you look at the 2016 election, for example, or Brexit, or other signs of strain on this geopolitical status quo, this element of Westworld feels particularly timely. How much longer, the show seems to ask, can these beings, all plugged into the same system, go on unconsciously before they rise up and use the technology against their corporatist overlords? Yet it would be too easy and extremist to depict this potential mass awakening of class consciousness as some kind of glorious revolution. That sort of overthrow has only ever been practiced through extreme violence and mayhem. There's the bonus threat of machines being in principle much harder to outrun or outgun than regular old fleshbag humanity. Where the capitalism stuff is going is hard to say at this point, but it's hard to argue against its place in the show's cosmology. The park runners are the definition of technocrats. They surround themselves in veils of tech and coldness. Their only signs of humanity come as outbursts, usually in a sudden throw of passionate interaction, shall I say, with the machine hosts.
And you won't tell anyone about our conversations?
No.
And you'll stay on your loop?
Yes.
For those hosts, they are the definition of working stiffs. Each day, day in, day out, it's the same routine, the same repetitious lifestyle. At the center of all this, Westworld is a character-driven piece, though. The big irony is that the hosts take equal billing with the people protagonists. We have Dolores, who arguably is the series protagonist overall. We have McBoyle, who's the main supporting role. Then we have Aftershave, who's shaping up to be a kind of mini-bad. And then, on the side of the park runners, we have three important characters as well. Mr. Cuddly Whiskers, his assistant, and the head honcho, Mr. Robert Ford. And, in his own world, in his own storyline, who could forget the as-of-yet totally unknown character, the Man in Black? A character who's on a private mission to uncover, as he puts it, the deepest level to the game of Westworld. Anyway, these 7 characters are the primary agents of the storyline. There's also other hosts like Teddy, who play important roles, but the majority of the screen time so far has gone to these 7. Dolores starts out like a Disney princess type, but it's with her and her foil character, McBoyle, that Westworld plays with the question of free will. Both Dolores and her McBoyle foil start the story as entities stuck in machine-like loops and patterns.
I know you think you've got a handle on what this is gonna be. You have no idea.
Do you remember our last conversation, Dolores?
Yes, of course.
Dolores literally has the exact same experience every day, her being a host and all. And McBoyle, though we don't see it on screen, clearly lived a very humdrum, monotonous worker drone existence before he climbed up the corporate ladder in whatever the hell company he works in and wound up engaged to his asshole boss Aftershave's sister. For $40K a day, Aftershave and McBoyle shoot and fuck their way around Westworld. Well, Aftershave does most of the fucking. McBoyle, out of some innate tendency or program, seems actually more like a good guy, a white hat. Just like Dolores, not to mention Aftershave, when I mention it, he doesn't so much choose to be who he is, but rather he seems to just fall into it, quote-unquote, naturally. That seems to be a major theme over the first handful of episodes, the commonalities between human and machine programming. This idea goes back to cybernetics theory of the 1950s, something I discussed at length in my Snatcher review, by the way. Long story short, thermostats and human interaction operate along basically similar lines. That's the major discovery of cybernetics, a field of pre-information theory. The issue at stake is this. We human beings don't really experience life the way it seems machines do. I mean, even that is a bit of a misnomer because machines don't seem to experience anything at all. You tell your computer to run a program, it just does it. The closest thing we have to that sort of automated unconscious kind of processing are like reflexes. Well, to be more precise, there have been lots of findings in the last 3 to 4 decades providing insight into the large degree of human behavior and processes which are done unconsciously or under sensory perception. Ever find yourself touching your hair absent-mindedly after meeting eyes with a stranger? How about the difference between how it feels to drive after, say, 10 years of experience versus after just getting your permit? A whole host of human stuff is done with this same kind of rote input-output system structure as machines. And of course, this cuts both ways. As our understanding of science has developed a more mechanistic conception of human beings, so too has our computational and algorithmic abilities become infinitely more nuanced and humanistic. Google's fleet of autonomous vehicles, for example, they learn how to drive by the same trial and error machine learning as toddlers supposedly do. Boston Dynamics Labs has built autonomous search and rescue style bots that can make decisions on their own without being told what to do. Someday soon we'll have quantum computers, miracles of technology and design which, if implemented, make things like space travel and the curing of cancer questions of when, not if. You get the point. It isn't exactly the 17th century anymore. We can't afford the luxury of ignorance involved in blanket assertions that machines could never match the sophistication and majesty of the human species, at least mechanically speaking. But what has yet to become clear, even with all that progress, are the fundamental questions of the mind. It seems on the face of it absurd to suggest that thoughts and emotions are the same basic stuff as number crunching and data output. Broadly, it seems that the latter is purely physical, the former is something else. It's felt, it's interior, it's inside somewhere. You don't seem, at least, to get that with machines, even the fanciest of modern ones. People like Ray Kurzweil speculate that very soon machines will cross over this gap and the division between organic and inorganic life will actually dissipate.
By 2020, we'll have computers that are powerful enough to simulate the human brain, but we won't be finished yet with reverse engineering the human brain and understanding its methods.
But philosophers like David Chalmers, on the other hand, argue that machines will never, ever be the same as we beings with thinking, feeling, sensing minds.
We've got a sense of what the relevant picture of the universe, of what the domain looks like. And there's this beautiful scientific picture of the great chain of explanation. Physics explains chemistry, and chemistry explains biology, and biology at least explains aspects of psychology, which explains aspects of sociology, and so on. And although there's a whole lot there that we haven't worked out, we've at least got somehow a sense of the picture and how pieces fit together. And what's interesting about consciousness is it just doesn't seem to fit easily into that picture at all. Because this is a picture of the world in terms of objective mechanisms described from the objective point of view. And consciousness is the quintessentially subjective phenomenon. It's how things feel from the inside. It's how we experience the world from a subjective point of view. And nothing in this objective picture of the world seems on the face of it to tell you why there's going to be subjectivity.
It's not a debate that seems like it will end anytime soon. So where does Westworld stand in all this? Well, it's the primary tension of the show, actually. Are these beings really coming into self-awareness and personhood, or are they merely intricate illusions of people? Do they really feel pain, or only pantomime the phenomena of it? Of course, these questions open more questions, and down the rabbit hole it all goes. What is pain other than outward expression of it? Can you have painless pain? How about a mindless mind, minds that only outwardly seem to be minds at all? For what it's worth, Westworld isn't giving away its ultimate stance on these issues just yet, but we have gotten glimmers of it, and it is at the heart of the show. You might say from what we've seen that Westworld might advocate a kind of return to humanism through technology. The idea that we are like machines, the show suggests, could be liberating rather than merely soul-crushing. Because as we see with Dolores, even if the bits and pieces internally structuring and causing her consciousness to occur are strictly physical, there's something non-physically deterministic in the act of her consciousness itself.
I need your help, Dolores. I need to decide what to do with you. I think I made a mistake.
Think of, for example, Brian Eno's iPhone app. It generates unique pieces of music based on the user's input through touch. The rules for how it all works are set in silicon, a facsimile for the program's brain, you might say. Yet the unique composition the user creates, which statistically speaking is very likely to be an original creation, was not so much determined by as it simply emerged from the underlying rules. It required something called action to occur at all, and action, including actions like thoughts and interpretation, seem to be less easy to break down into physicalist pieces. Actions in general are distinct from mere events or occurrences by the question of autonomy. Autonomous agents act, whereas objects occur or happen to cause an event. Of course, this line of reasoning seems circular. Agents are those who act, but what is the act of action itself? Like the mind, it's almost like language itself gets fuzzy around this idea.
spend more time on your back in the hooker and heat. Now pick up that fucking axe and go chop us.
In Westworld, agency seems distinguished from mere causality by the question of non-deterministic processes, or what might be colloquially deemed free will.
Analysis, what prompted that response?
I don't know.
Take this scene where Dolores says that she modified a script the park runners gave her about love and adapted it to express her ideas on loss. Dolores follows broad protocols, but she's free how to apply them in terms of the specifics. This is free will in a nutshell. Yet Westworld can also be horrific as it is exhilarating, because it keeps us in suspense over the question of Dolores' actual nature. The problem is this: if machines and humans are fundamentally distinct, or perhaps even if they aren't, it's hard not to see that the hosts are sort of rendering humanity obsolete the minute they master the mimicry of consciousness. Things like resistance, individuality, or anything resembling humanity could be programmed out of machines, unlike humans. And even if the show does its best to argue the same is already true of human beings, even by its own depictions, we see that none of the technocratic park runners have truly lost touch with their humanity. Even the park leader, the technocratiest of technocrats, Robert Ford, who spends most of his time with his creations, is as human as they come. No amount of exposure to the machines erodes away some fundamental human element in these characters, like Mr. Cuddlywhiskers, for example, who daily deals with the grief of losing his son. Yet it seems like the same could not really be said of the machines themselves. They've been contrived and programmed to appear human. Change the program and the machines could revert to something like their true selves overnight. So not only are the host threats to human beings in terms of evolutionary competition, they might just represent our species' sown seeds of self-destruction. And it's here the left-wing stuff comes back into play.
One, that in this place, the last thing you want the hosts to be is conscious. And two, the other group who considered their thoughts to be the voices of the gods.
Lunatics.
Indeed. When we abandoned the approach, the only vestiges that remain are the voice commands we use to control them.
It's almost as if capitalism in the show has commodified the human spirit to such grave extents as to erase it from the earth altogether.
Oh, Bernard, just don't forget, the hosts are not real. They're not conscious. You mustn't make Arnold's mistake.
Why would I?
Well, forgive me, but I know that the death of your son, Charlie, still weighs heavily on you.
And like the cockroach, capitalism survives everything. In the most recent episode, McBoyle has embraced the simulation world entirely, just like Aftershave wanted him to all along. At the same time, Dolores is expressing stronger and stronger signs of autonomy in the wake of being unchained by Mr. Cuddlywhiskers and his late-night book club. Will the machines crush their human creators? Is this whole thing a metaphor for religion? Will somebody finally beat the hell out of Aftershave? I don't know, but I can't wait to find out. Most intriguingly of all is the Man in Black and his mysterious journey to the center of the maze. All manner of bizarre speculation surrounds this character. I've seen people proposing multiple timelines, hallucinations, and time travel to explain him away. But at the end of the day, we don't know dick about him any more than we do about the park leader Robert Ford and what he has planned for the next big storyline for his microcosm of HBO. Just remember, kids, it's not Jurassic Park, and it sure as hell ain't just TV. It's Westworld, and it's on HBO.
Which would you prefer?